This lesson is about using formal tone in our writing. And definitely take notes on this. This is something you're going to be needing every time you write an essay. But before we talk about essays, let's talk about the way we speak. We need a couple different ways to communicate, to function in all the different areas of our life. It's kind of like your clothing. You wouldn't wear the same thing to the beach as you would wear to a party, as you would wear to church, as you would wear to a wedding. You should have a different outfit for every one of those situations. Well, similarly, you have a different way of communicating in different situations. They're called different registers. And the most formal way is called the frozen register, and that's things like the Pledge of Allegiance and the Lord's Prayer, where everyone says the same thing at the same time, and it's solid. Nobody changes it. Below that is formal, and that's what we're talking about now. And this is the way we communicate in a business letter, or when we're speaking to a very important person, or when we write essays. And uses very advanced vocabulary, no slang, no shortcuts, and it shows respect. Below that is consultative. This is the way that you would communicate with an adult or a stranger, and it's, you wouldn't use a lot of slang, but you don't have to be quite as careful. Casual is how you talk or how you write with friends, and intimate is the way you would talk to super close friends or family members. And you need a different voice for each of these situations. It sounds really silly if you mix it up. And as an example, think about think about eating and how you would communicate that. Would you use a different word if you were at a fancy dinner, or if you were speaking to your parent, or when you were at the cafeteria with your friends? I hope so. If you were at a fancy dinner, you wouldn't say, "Oh yeah, I would like to chow down on a steak." Similarly, if you're in the cafeteria with your friends and they say, "What are you going to get to eat?" you were not going to say, "I would like to dine on chicken fingers." That would sound really silly. So you need different voices. And today we're talking about the formal tone, which is how we write essays. So a quick overview is that the formal tone doesn't use personal pronouns. We don't talk about ourselves. We don't talk about the other person. We don't use contractions. Those are shortcuts for speaking. We don't use slang and casual conversational language. We don't use text message shortcuts. We are careful with our numbers, and there is a rule for that. If it takes more than 3 words to write out the number, we use the digits. But if we can do it in 1, 2, or 3 words, we use the words. And we don't ask questions, even rhetorical questions, because we're delivering information to the reader. They're not responding. Now, all of these rules apply to the thesis statement and the bodies of the body paragraphs of your essay. They don't apply to the hook in the introduction, the reference to the hook in the conclusion, or quotes that you've taken from another source. All right, let's begin with pronouns. When you're writing an essay, you're sharing information with the world. It's not just a conversation with the teacher. And since you're basing your ideas either on a text you've read or on research, you don't have to phrase it as your opinion. You can just say it. So you don't have to say, to me, this is important, or in my opinion. You can just state it. And so we don't use personal pronouns like I, me, mine, you, yo, yours, we, us, ours, because it makes it more of a conversation, and this is a delivery of information to everybody, potentially everybody in the world. So we don't use personal pronouns. Think about this. If you did a research paper about the development of a baby, what's wrong if the student writes, "If you suspect that you're pregnant, you should go to the doctor right away. Proper prenatal care of your baby is vital." And what's wrong with that? Well, half of your audience are male and don't get pregnant. And that would be really silly, especially if I'm your teacher and I'm reading it. So you can't say, "If you suspect you are pregnant." Because who's the one getting pregnant? It's new mothers. And so instead of saying you, we would say if a new mother. All right, so alternatives to personal pronouns. Well, let's just say this. Instead of using personal pronouns, think about the person who would be doing it and actually use that person. So you should not move too fast and spook your horse. Well, I don't ride horses, but horse riders do and equestrians do. So you can use those words instead. Most of us believe it's wrong to burn our nation's flag. How about most Americans believe it's wrong to burn the nation's flag? And so that would be, that's a lot more appropriate. And sometimes you can say, instead of you can say one. One should not take liberty for granted. And, you can use also you can use other non-personal pronouns like most believe or few have experienced. So try finding a different alternative word instead of personal pronouns. Now, if you're not using personal pronouns, you still have to make them agree. So in the sentence, a student must turn in their homework. Well, that doesn't have personal pronouns. That's good. Except that the pronouns don't agree, because a student is singular and their is plural. And so we either have to make them both plural or both singular. So we can say students must turn in their homework. That works. Or a student must turn in his or her homework. In the old days, people would just write his, but as we know, that cuts out half of our population. And so it's very proper to say his or her. The other thing you can do is if you're writing a long essay and you plan on talking about a lot of different students, you can make the first one female. A student must turn in her homework. And then in the next paragraph, you can make the next example student a him and say, if a student has a problem, he should ask the teacher. So as long as you flip-flop both, then all males and all females know that you're looking out for them and you are not being biased. Okay. All right, so as I said, you may use all these casual things like personal pronouns in the hook, in the conclusion where you refer back to the hook, and in a direct quotation when you've taken this from some other source. Because when you quote somebody else, you have to keep their words exactly as they are. So that's okay to use all of the casual things if they're appropriate for your hook or present in your quote. All right, numbers. Numbers are a little tricky because this isn't math. This is English or history or something like that, though it is possible to write a math paper. This does not apply to science papers. Usually in science papers you would keep them all in digits. But if you're writing for English or history or another social science, then if the word can be written in one or two words, use the words. If it takes 3 or more words, use the digits. So 1, 13, 52, 100, 1 million, each of those numbers is only 2 words, and so you just use the words. But think about how ridiculous it would be to write 1,256,000 all in words. That would be too much. So if it takes more than 2 words, if it takes 3 or more words, use the digits. So 101, you would just write 101. And if there's a decimal, you're using digits. But notice 35 million, you write the 35 in digits, and then you write out the word million. It's a lot cleaner than 350000000. No one wants to see that in the paper. So having a couple digits and then the word thousand, million, or billion fits a lot better. Another rule about numbers, never begin a sentence with a number, no matter what. If you have a ridiculously long number at the beginning of the sentence, technically you have to write it all out in words, or what's much better is put another word in front of it. Just put a prepositional phrase in front of it, and now that number is no longer at the beginning, and you can use digits. And if there's a unit of measurement, like a 451 degrees, or 17 centimeters, or 6 pounds, then you always use digits and you may abbreviate your units. So LBS period is okay for pounds. All dates and times use digits unless it's something really fast, like we're going to meet on the 25th. But if it's the date is any longer, use digits. And percents, fractions, decimals, addresses, page numbers, and money, always use digits. And be sure to include the dollar sign when talking about money, as long as it's American money. All right, verb tense, as you know, in history papers and in papers where things have happened in the past, we use past tense, but in literature papers, we always use present tense verbs because anytime someone opens up the book, that character lives again. Occasionally you'll find a teacher that doesn't think that literature papers have to be in present tense. So definitely listen to what your teacher asks for. The most important thing is don't flip-flop. That's always going to be wrong. Titles. When you have a title of something that's published independently, you're always going to italicize it. If you're handwriting, you would underline it. But if you're typing, you're going to italicize it. So, books, plays, long poems that are published as a book, magazines like Time Magazine or Thrasher Magazine, those are italicized. Newspapers like the LA Times or the Daily News. Films and movies, television programs, an album like a CD and like the Beatles' White Album, operas, paintings, ships, the SS Titanic, that would be italicized. Aircraft like the Enola Gay, that's the aircraft that dropped the atomic bomb, and spacecraft like the Apollo 13. Those are all italicized. We use quotation marks around pieces of larger published works. So articles in a newspaper or magazine, essays, short stories that come in a big book of a collection of books, poems that are in a poetry collection, songs that are on an album, and episodes of television programs. Those all use quotation marks. All right, contractions. Contractions are great when we're speaking because they make it more convenient and fast. But when we are writing essays, we're in no hurry, so don't use contractions. So write out cannot instead of can't, and will not instead of won't. Apostrophe S is okay for possessive, to show that someone owns something, but not like she's should not be used instead of she is. No slang. Just no casual words, but I actually consider lots and stuff and things as pretty casual. And I didn't write it, but the other thing that's always casual is the word get, got, and gotten. Take that out of your writing. There's always a better word than get, got, or gotten. So get rid of get. Don't use any symbols like the ones we like to use in text messages. That's another shortcut. We would just write that out. And the ellipse, ... never use that unless you have a long quote and you've taken out a chunk of the quote in the middle. So if the quote is too long and you like information at the beginning and the end, then you may drop a phrase or clause out of the middle with an ellipse. But you would never end with an ellipse. The other thing I'd like you to avoid is the exclamation point. I had a friend that said you're allowed 7 exclamation points in your whole life, so use them sparingly. So formal essays are not the time to be using exclamation points. Save those for notes with friends. Please don't begin sentences with well and well, because that's kind of like a casual thing we say. Don't begin with a contraction like so, and, or but, because those conjunctions, so, and but. Those are conjunctions that are meant to glue two things together, and you would never put glue on one side of a piece of paper. You'd put glue between two pieces of paper. So use those in the middle. And then the word then, I don't like that because when you put one sentence after another, obviously the second sentence happens secondly. You don't have to write then to show that it came later. And then also is better in the middle of a sentence, not at the beginning. Essays can't talk about themselves. They're not arrogant like that. So don't have essays refer back to themselves like earlier in this essay and later in this essay. Just say what you want to say. The reader will remember. And also never give commands to the reader. Remember, the subject of a command is you, and you know that we don't use personal pronouns like you. So don't tell the reader what to do. Like, read on and you will learn about dolphins. I'm the reader. Don't tell me what to do. Just write what you want to write. And if I learn, then you're a good writer. And if I don't learn, then you should have written better. But don't tell me what I'm going to learn. Instead, just have a thesis statement that documents what dolphins do. Don't tell me that I'm going to learn about dolphins. Right. You might pause and look at these sentences. These are casual, and I'll have formal. I'll turn them into formal sentences on the next slide. And here are those same sentences in formal tone. So again, use casual tone when you're writing to friends. Use formal tone when you're writing essays. But one last note, if you're writing a personal essay about a personal experience, then obviously you can use some of the personal pronouns, but you would still follow all of the other rules. All right, enjoy.